In this demo, I'm going to focus on different ways of declaring parameters. We'll look at examples of optional, default, and REST parameters. I'm going to begin by writing a new function named createCustomer that takes some optional parameters. Since we don't have a database, it won't actually create a customer anywhere, but we'll use it to log the values passed to it. It's going to take three parameters. The first will be the customer name and will be required. The second will be age, and I'll make it optional by adding a question mark immediately after the name of the parameter. The third parameter will be city and will also be optional. Remember that all optional parameters must appear after all required parameters, so I've added these after the required name. In the body of the function, I'm first going to log the name of the customer. I want to do the same thing for age and city, but since they're optional, I'll use an if statement to see if they exist before logging them. I now want to call it with a few different parameter combinations. I'm going to comment out the code from the last demo and move it down a bit. I'll first call createCustomer with a single parameter, the required name. I'll run it and we get just the one log statement with the new customer name. Since I didn't pass the other parameters, the if statements around them evaluated to false and no attempt was made to log them. I'll call it again, just passing the first and second parameters. This time there was a second parameter, so the if statement around it evaluated to true and it was logged. I'll do it one more time and pass all three parameters. As you probably expected, it logs all three values. Okay, let's now see how to use default parameters. In the last module, I wrote a function named getBookTitlesByCategory that takes a category as a parameter and returns an array of strings containing all of the book titles that belong to that category. If I try to call that function without a parameter, I get the red squiggly line letting me know something's not quite right. I'll hover over it and it tells me that the supplied parameters do not match any signature of call target. We can also see the signature of the function, which clearly takes a category as a parameter. I'd like to be able to call this function without a parameter and have it use a default category in those cases. I'll scroll up to where I define that function. Adding a default value to the category filter parameter is as easy as adding an equal sign and then the value that should be used if no value is passed to the function. I'll have it use the fiction category. I'll come back down to the function call and the red squiggly line has gone away. That's always good. Just to show that it can be used the way it was previously, I'll pass it the poetry category and then log the title of all the books it returns. I'll run it and it logs the one poetry book in our library. I'll now refactor the name of my variable to be fiction books and remove the parameter I'm passing to the function so that it uses the default value I specified earlier. I'll run it again and this time we get all of the fiction books since that was the default category I added to the function parameter. I also want to show you that you can set the default value of a parameter equal to an expression. It doesn't have to be a literal value. I'm going to make a call to the logFirstAvailable function, which we also wrote in the last module. It currently expects to be passed an array of books and will print the title of the first book in the array that's available to be checked out. If I try to call it with no parameters, we get a red squiggly with the same message we saw earlier. I'll scroll up to the definition for the function and set the default value for the books parameter to be the array of books returned from the getAllBooks function. I'll come back down and we see that the red squiggly line is gone. I'll run the code and it logs the first available book from the list of all books. Let's now write a function that accepts a REST parameter and see how they work. I'll start by writing a new function named checkoutBooks. I want to be able to pass this function a customer name and a list of the book IDs he or she wants to check out. It might be 1 or it might be 10. The first parameter will be a string for the customer's name. The second parameter will be a REST parameter that will capture all of the book IDs. I'll name the parameter book IDs and denote it as a REST parameter by placing an ellipsis, 3 dots, in front of the parameter name. Since each book ID will be a number, the type of the REST parameter will be an array of numbers. All of the IDs I pass will be captured in a single array. The function will return an array of strings that will contain the titles of all the books that were checked out. I'm going to use a code snippet to paste in the body of the function. The function first logs the name of the customer. I then declare a new string array to store the book titles for the books that are actually checked out. The book ID's REST parameter captures all of the IDs in an array which I can loop over just like any other array. I loop over all of the IDs and use the getBookById function we wrote earlier to retrieve each book and check its available property to see if it can be checked out. If so, I push the title of the book onto the Books Checked Out array. After looping over all the IDs, I return the array of titles. The important pieces to note here are the syntax for declaring a REST parameter with the ellipsis and the fact that once the values are captured in an array, I can use it like any other array inside the function body. Let's now see how to call the new function. I'll declare a new string array named MyBooks to store the titles returned from the function. I'll first call it with a customer name and one book ID. As I've done before, I'll call for each on the returned array and log the results with an arrow function. I'll press F5 to run it. It logged the customer name and the name of the book he checked out. I'll change the code to pass 3 book IDs this time. I'll run it again and, as expected, 3 books are logged. I hope you've seen that optional, default, and REST parameters are very nice features that allow you to maintain the flexibility you may have enjoyed with JavaScript, but also add some checks along the way that will improve the quality of your code.